Hello and welcome to the Pragati Vichar Literature Festival. Today we're going to be in conversation with Rashid Kidwai, the author of The House of Scindias, which has also been nominated actually in this festival in the best non-fiction category. So I compliment you on this book, Rashid. And of course, it's a fascinating read. I've read it, we've had many conversations, but it's one of those evergreen topics that doesn't die out really. So first of all, what made you write this book? What made you focus on the Scindias per se?
Thank you, Priya Sagal. And I'm grateful to Pragati E-Vichar Literary Festival organizers for having given me an opportunity. Yes, Priya, you have done a book on the contenders, the politicians of the present and future, I would say, and how these people are shaping up. So I think this is a fascinating topic to begin with, and I think I was somewhat motivated by your work, and then I thought that let us look at that individual this thing. And House of Scindias, I found it very fascinating. Not fascinating because they are royals or something, but in democracy. See, the Scindia dynasty was formed in 1731. And till date, I mean, this is a record I think a very few in the world can match. Because if you look around all those royals and royalty, you see they were there till the monarchy served. And after that, in democracy, they could not go for shape. So they got shipped out. But in case of Scindia, there's been not a day since 1731 till today that they have been, so to say, with the part of ruling class. At the time of independence, when India got independence, the Maharaja of Gwalior was appointed Rajya Pramukh, which is like governor of a state. And in 57 elections, Rajmata Vijayaraje Scindia got elected as a Congress MP. 62, she again got elected. So in the post-independent India, they've been there either in Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, or in the State Assembly.
Always been a Scindia ruling. In fact, it is a fascinating family. You have a dowager queen, you have a palace intrigue, you even have a palace Rasputin, you have political fights, you have property fights. So there has, should I do it again? Sorry. So there has been, it is a fascinating read. There has been, political fights. There is a dowager queen. There is, Rasputin. There are palace intrigues. There's a property fight. There's a political fight. But now, Rashid, if we look at the present, it all has come together. As in, they've all come to one political platform. Perhaps the political fights have also been resolved. How do you see that happening? How will the Scindias all live together in the BJP happily ever after, or there will be some problems?
I think, Priya, you see that one of the subtitle of the book is the saga of power, politics, and intrigue. So basically, what we have been able to see through kind of academic and political examination of their lives, they are, Priya, as much human beings in flesh and blood as ordinary people are. So there are a lot of it's a story of ambition, it's a story of service, it's a story of sacrifice, and it's a story of family splitting and family again reuniting. So very much like a great Indian household, those kind of things. There will be a lot of elements of tragedy. I wish people who have not read, they read it, they will find it very interesting, because how the women, like any other section of Indian society, women had to struggle a lot to come up and to outshine men, and which I think India women have done it in a great kind of, in a very classy way, whether it was Rajmata Scindia or Vasundhara Raje Scindia, first woman chief minister of Rajasthan, then Yashodhara Raje, and she comes from America and leads a very kind of extraordinary life in India, in the sense that she did not have anyone to mentor her, and she won several times. Understated, while Yashodhara's achievements are no less. And of course, we have this mother of Scindia and Jyotiraditya Scindia. So what I'm saying is, this is their story of reuniting or coming together in the BJP that you're referring to. That Jyotiraditya Scindia is now back in BJP, Vasundhara Raje is in BJP, Yashodhara is a minister in BJP. I think it's just a kind of a temporary thing, and it will unfold, because on the face of it they all look united. But then again, as I said previously, that matter of personal ambition, Because if you look at
Actually,
the
I
BJP,
would say Jyotiraditya is a natural fit in the BJP. You know, he's settled down very well from all accounts. I think you and I were discussing on another platform. He seems to be become quite a favorite with the Home Minister. He's found his moorings in the BJP, hasn't he? So is that the natural party for DNA of Scindia's is BJP? Am I right?
yes, I think Scindia is a contender because he finds a mention in your book also. But then being a contender is one thing which is very good, and I would say that a lot of pluses for him. He's very articulate, he speaks well, and as you were pointing out, he gels very well with the Home Minister uh, uh, Amit Shah ji and others. But let's not forget, Vasundhara is a fighter. And when she fights like nobody. She has created a niche for herself. Ask anyone in Rajasthan or for the better entire BJP, they would tell you she goes against the tide and wins. So I am very much interested to see how these things unfold, because
Who's your favorite
never
Scindia? Or
underestimate
who would you
women and never underestimate a Scindia woman.
never underestimate a Scindia woman, says Rashid Kidwai. I think that answers my next question, really, the question I was going to ask him as to which Scindia he's, thinks is going to be the most interesting one to watch out for. He said it's going to be Vasundhara. But in terms of Vasundhara's position in the BJP, she not only left her own home state, she carved her fortunes in another a very feudal state where women have a tougher battle, uphill battle, where the Scindia name was not an advantage to her at all. So out of the three, who do you think is the mother's real heir apparent?
I think, yeah, I think it would be rather unfair not to give any credit to Yashodhara Rajesh Scindia, though she has struggled hard and she has won many electoral battles. I have covered the election, you have covered, on her own, and she does not have that kind of iconic tag that Jyotiraditya Scindia has in and around Gwalior, or Vasundhara Raje in Rajasthan. But I would still say that Vasundhara Raje is a person who has done a lot and who has a lot of future, because she's very street smart. She's you see her campaign, the kind of schemes as chief minister she launched. Many of these schemes, Priya, now they are being followed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his government. But obviously she's not getting any credit for it. Second thing is that if you see her style of campaigning, she's very down to earth, would not use AC, would intermingle with all kind of things. I mean, and she wears different hats. You see, she is of course a royal, but that is the least of her priorities when she, she's out to campaign in Rajasthan. She projects herself as a kind of Gujar Bahu. She projects herself as a OBC, and she a kind of Susral, and someone who's very I mean, her marriage did not last very long, but as someone who's a daughter-in-law of not only Dholpur but entire Rajasthan. And I think she's very down to earth. If you see her kind of not only that, I mean, what I like most about her is she's a very avid book reader. She's very well aware person of what's happening not only in India but all over the world. Remember, she was Minister of State for External Affairs. She did exceedingly well. So I think her grasp of subjects, and not one subject, is very good, and she's able to dictate terms vis-a-vis bureaucracy, because most chief ministers that I know, they go by what the chief ministers tell them to do so. The bureaucracy tells them to do so, particularly IS lobby. But I have seen Vasundhara's style of working is very different.
Do you see her surviving? Because we know that she's not a favorite with the prime minister, unlike her brother, who's maybe it's because he needs good governance people in his cabinet, and Jyotiraditya fits that bill. Vasundhara doesn't seem to have the backing of either Modi or Amit Shah. But does she have a good equation with the RSS? Does she have a good strong appeal amongst the MLAs? Where is her strength?
Yeah, I think she is going to face little element of uncertainty from now till December 2023, when a new government in Rajasthan will be formed. It depends a lot what happens in the Congress, what happens between Ashok Gehlot and Sachin Pilot. So in some sense, if Ashok Gehlot continues, which there is a strong possibility as a chief minister of Rajasthan, then he is an easy meet for her. She knows how to win, because I mean, twice she has defeated Ashok Gehlot in a rather comprehensive manner. So there is, the legacy is on her side. I don't think there is any Challenger, all those Shekhawats and others who are propping themselves up. I don't think they are a match. So therefore, if you see the central BJP leadership, it's keeping her at arm's length. But there is no kind of, she's not being kind of cut, cut down to size or something like that. That exercise has not taken place. She's very much on her own. I think closer to elections in 2023, we will get to see the real Vasundhara Raje Scindia, how the kind of deft moves she wants to. I don't want to just speculate and hazard a guess or something, but I think she is in for a real, battle royal there.
If anyone is up to it, it is her. In fact, what I like about the book is that you also devote a chapter less to each of the characters, and each one is a very riveting personality on their own, from Yashodhara to Vasundhara to Jyotiraditya, of course. But a little bit on the background, Madhav Rao joining the Congress. Was it just a political affront? Because you say the personal equations between them were always in the gray area. Even when they were campaigning against each other, they weren't really taking pot shots at each other. So what was the equation between mother and son, Madhav Rao and his mother?
I think with a degree of clarity, I can say Madhav Rao Scindia was actually a very liberal person, of one who had studied in Oxford, etc. But he had some kind of Western outlook, and he was actually impressed by the Western idea of, so to say, secularism, having respect for all faiths, and he genuinely believed it, even when he was having differences with his mother, or earlier when he was part of MP briefly with Bharatiya Jansangh, but he did not subscribe to that ideology. So I think ideology was something that mattered to him much more than his son or some of the other family members. So he was not very comfortable being part of Jansangh, or for that matter, joining the BJP later. And I think his differences with Mother Vijay Raje Scindia or Rajmata Scindia were not just political. It was also about how Rajmata Scindia was spending money, so to say, giving away his family silver for the upkeep of Bharatiya Jansangh. And there were a lot of, Madhavaji perhaps felt that a lot of people were personally benefiting from it. So it was a kind of mix of everything. He was, because at one time, Priya, we know that Rajmata Scindia was a kind of loner. She became widowed at a young age. She had to fight within the kind of political ideology that she was part of, whether it was Bharatiya Jansangh or sometime that Swatantra Party, etc. She had a very big and a personal battle with Indira Gandhi. So, and perhaps she was hoping and leaning on her son, who she called Bhaiya, to kind of stand by her, but he didn't. And of course, we know that there is a character that you mentioned, and he played a very kind of, I would say, a dubious role. That's why I have subtitles says intrigue. What was that palace intrigue? So he took that kind of space to instigate Rajmata Scindia and pit son versus mother kind of battle. So a lot of emotional turmoil was there. But the end, actually, it's very difficult, Priya, for me as a writer to decide who was right and who was wrong, because you see so many kind of human side of both of them.
What I find ironic is between the mother and the son, there was some gray area. Yes, it was bitter. She even left one will where she totally disowned him and said that he should not light my funeral pyre, which he did. But again, when you also write in your book, when he's like asked to campaign against her candidate, he would always say, "Meri izzat rakh do." Matlab, you don't know whether he wants you to vote for his mother's candidate or he wants you to vote for the Congress. So there was that ambiguity, or alag tarah ka differences tha, dikhate the in public. But where Jyotiraditya was and his two aunts were concerned, it was very public. It was in the courts. It was very bitter, and everybody knew about it. Like again, an instance from your book, I think when Yasho Raje Scindia's younger sister's aunt's son got married. The reception was hosted in Gwalior, but the night before, I believe Jyotiraditya Scindia got the palace lawns watered, so she couldn't hold the reception there, and she had to shift the venue to a hotel. So that was very bitter and very in public. So the younger generation did not carry out with the same gravitas as the older one, where you could be left guessing. But here, it was very clear that there are two sides at war. is his joining the BJP part of that reconciliation? Now what is the situation between the aunts and the nephew?
I think like what we know in politics कि जो दिखता है वो होता नहीं है. So this is of course a narrative is there that the entire Scindia family is there. But what I'm saying is there are two aspects. One is a national politics aspect of it, where, as you know, the BJP, again, there is a kind of contradiction, but the BJP appears to be very much anti any kind of dynasty culture or perpetuating it. Look how they are treating Maneka Gandhi and Varun Gandhi. So it's a matter of kind of, so Jyotiraditya Scindia has found a place because he got them power in Madhya Pradesh, which was gone in 2018 for 5 long years, and it came back within 15 months. So that is why he is being pampered and rewarded. And of course, his performance as civil aviation minister, his oratory skill, and all is adding to it. But what I'm saying is, whenever we look at any kind of time frame, let's say 2024. See, then there will be a kind of thing that we were talking about post Modi era because of the age factor of 74 Prime Minister turning 75, etc. in 2025, 2026, something like that period. And then would Jyotiraditya be in the top 10 or top 5 of that, BGP contenders? Okay. And that's where Vasundhara Raje is not that old. And if she can return as Chief Minister of Rajasthan, if Ashok Gehlot is around and she manages to beat him the way she had done it in the past, then what happens? So elected Chief Minister, okay, and a woman, someone who has a track record, a performance, then you see, again, you would see that it will be much more than this watering of lawn, etc. It will become far more, I would say, bitter and direct. And intra-party feuds are also not unknown either in the BJP or in our political classes because of that aura of Prime Minister Modi and aura because of his electoral success. That all these things are not, are not being highlighted. But me and you know as political correspondents that these things do exist even now. So I would say that that's what I'm saying. The year 23, 24, 25 is going to be very interesting in the internal politics of BJP, where all the Scindias have parked themselves in.
The internal politics of BJP, the RSS is very important also, Rashid. So which of the Scindias do you think RSS would favor?
I think, again, woman has a disadvantage here because Vasundhara Raje has fought many battles and successfully with elements of RSS. I won't say entire RSS, but elements in RSS in Rajasthan politics. So she's clearly not a favorite. And here I'm not bringing her gender in it. I'm very careful about it. But Jyotiraditya Scindia is a Rajmata's grandson, Rajmata who had done so much to kind of fund that Bharatiya Jansangh or right-wing ideology, Hindu Mahasabha, etc. So I think, again, Jyotiraditya Scindia has a distinct advantage when it comes to, vis-a-vis RSS. But I'm not really sure, and that's what I'm saying, that, we cannot just predict that Jyotiraditya Scindia is going to be a front runner for all time to come. Because again, I said, see, Vasundhara is a fighter, and if she can win a state and deliver it to the BJP, to the world, then that would be much more than. Remember, Jyotiraditya Scindia is not a kind of, a chief ministerial contender or a material in Madhya Pradesh. He has, his area of influence is around Gwalior Chambal region, just like his father. And he is not actually pitching himself or positioning himself as a, Shivraj Singh Chauhan successor or so. He's happy with this kind of dignity and respect he gets in the state, and that's it. And he's focusing on center. But Priya, you remember all the successful politicians now are coming from states, whether it's Mamata Banerjee, whether it's Arvind Kejriwal, or Prime Minister Modi is a very big example. We have this Yogi Adityanath also. If he can win Uttar Pradesh again, or for the matter, if Akhilesh wins, he will also become a contender.
Sarma, yes.
So
Chief
now
Ministers are all getting presidential ambitions.
Politics, or MK Stalin and many others. So I'm saying this, you see, now it is worth, if it's like real estate, no, you buy land. I would say for a politician, it's much better to invest in states rather than, at the center. So that's where I think Vasundhara has an advantage. It's a very protected, very engaging kind of battle that we are going to see.
But coming to that, Rashid, how do you, writing a political biography of people who are still living and around, how has that experience been? You must
My
have
God.
met.
My God, that's the most difficult thing actually, and that's why I want to tell our viewers and book reader that it's never easy, because you have to there's so many challenges are there, and it's an evolving thing also. A politician, like I started writing this book and I started doing research. Jyotirita Scindia was in Congress, and the middle of halfway through, you see, he switched sides and whole kind of dimension change. But
It was
the
very good for your book because it came out around when the whole focus was on them.
absolutely, but Priya, I had to, what I'm saying, and the many people who are watching this and hearing it, they would benefit from our conversation, because see, one must keep the reader's interest, your top priority. Remember, books are not written for the topics that we are talking about. So the book is, I mean, it's about Scindia family, this House of Scindia. But my modest, humble attempt has been to familiarize the readers. What is their history? What is their legacy? What are their shortcomings? How they have shaped up? Pleasant, bitter, unpleasant, truth, or everything has to be presented, and that too with reference and documentation, not like kind of hearsay or gossip or sillies, anything like that. So these challenges are multiply when a living politician is there. We are not, as authors, me and Priya Sehgal, we have not looked for endorsement from these individuals. I mean, they have been nice and kind and respectful to us. And we have also been, in that sense, been careful about it. But it's not easy, because as journalists, we have to deal with them on daily basis. There are, so to say, sources also. So therefore, when you write a book is a different thing. It's something which is kept in the shelf and somebody can bring out and say this. So it's a very big challenging assignment, writing about living politician. And that is why, I mean, you will find, I mean, I'm being slightly being modest, that there are not many like me and Priya around who have written about living politicians. And we are there in the field and kind of negotiating all such challenges, which are there. A lot of aspects that we cannot even talk about. These are the things that are there, but that makes you a journalist, that makes you an author. And the kind of, I mean, if the book is read, somebody simply reads it, that itself is the biggest, I mean, I would say, compliment and a matter of satisfaction for authors.
Absolutely. In fact, Rashida told, even as a journalist, we have this problem. And in fact, I remember the late Pramod Mahajan, he had just come to the national scene, and he had a very dubious reputation about him. So we were doing a cover story on him, and the title was more or less decided. We were going to say The Fixer, which is not a very complimentary word. But I was sent to get his interview. So I got the interview and I came back, and he kept saying, Kab aayegi? Because he was very excited. The first time he was on the cover of a magazine. And I kept saying, हाँ पर आएगी. Then I thought, let me just warn him a bit. I said, शायद आपको ज़्यादा complimentary नहीं लगेगा. So he said, give me the advance copy, because in those days the advance copy used to come, and then the issue used to hit the stands 3 days later, not like today when everything is click of a button. So he said, doesn't matter. आपने लिखा आपका byline है. Whatever it is, you must also have whatever you write, you must be able to face the person the next day with whatever you write. And I think that's a very important lesson. I think that all of us have learned as journalists, Rashid, myself, and that, whatever, you have to stand by what you write. Criticism, praise, whatever, even you praise someone too much, you get jacked with for that also, so you have to be very careful and measured in your words. And as Rashid said, writing a book is because it's the all-time testament to your work. It's there for all times. So you have to stand by what you write.
Yes, Priya. And thing is that it becomes like a document. A problem with the newspaper article, or even for that matter, a magazine, is that it gets dated. Whereas, a book is there, so for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, and it's a very good source of, reference and research material. So, I mean, journalists and I would say authors like me and Priya, what we try to do more, and this is where I think it's very important that you should be very careful what not to include. A lot of our time and effort goes in kind of removing things, because things that cannot be authenticated, that you cannot cite a source or a credible reference. Because remember, we are not here to kind of perpetuate the kind of gossip and hearsay these things, because this is about people's life. I mean, it's their personal life, their public life. It matters a lot. So there is a great deal of responsibility, and of course matters of conscience that requires another session Priya. I mean, one can go on talking about those kind of moral and ethical challenges that we face. But by the time of product, and that's where I think, reputed publishers also matter a lot, whether it's, Penguin or Rolly or any other this thing, they also take a lot of care. A book, for the benefit of readers, I mean, and viewers, I'm saying, the book also has to go through kind of, legal check. So it's not something that whatever we say gets printed. A lot of hard work goes in, and that's what I'm saying. Writing part is just, what do I say, Priya? 30%, 40% of it.
First
60%
draft of
is,
history, as Pranab
yeah,
Mukherjee
is
used to say.
this, that is your reference, your legwork, your kind of, this. Then writing part is, I think, easier of the things. I mean, some people may draw comfort, some people may find it challenging, but that's how it is.
Also, you said personal and the public. So how do you decide what is okay, which part of the personal life I can write about, or which part I should just leave? Because everybody is entitled to a personal life, even politicians, though they may be in the public arena. But there's somewhere where one has to draw the line. I feel that. I mean, and I've seen you also been careful about that.
Yeah, I think you've raised a very pertinent issue, because this is an issue that's there and it faces, challenges in every society. So various, countries have different laws and all, like, and in America, first of all, if you're a public figure, then you have nothing as something known as personal. You are a public persona, and then everything can be written, and there the society and courts, etc., have taken a rather liberal position. So there's not so much of defamation or fight over it. In Britain, it's slightly more conservative, and therefore you have a lot of legal cases. Many Indian politicians or Indian, I would say, individuals have fought their like kind of this kind of defamatory battle in England, because they found it, that laws are very actually strong there. In Indian conditions, things are very, very, I would say, fluid, because the court proceedings take a lot of time. It favors the rich and powerful in terms of getting some kind of injection or some kind of control and check. So it's here the legal position is slightly blurred. I mean, theoretically, of course, we have all those legal framework, but to come to the specific of what Priya Sehgal was asking, I would say that things that have gone public, that should be written, because if it was published in the newspapers and magazines and nobody, so to say, objected, or it was not kind of expunged at that point of time, then they are there in public domain. So therefore, if a book is making a reference of it, it's absolutely fine. Like what happened in Nepal, there was a, that kind of royal massacre that had taken place, and some I mean, if you read my book, you will find some reference to it, to to Scindia family, not directly, but in the indirect sense. So I'm saying these things one can write about it. But there are like that family feud, the matters which are in court and kind of personal life. But you see, I mean, if though people were, having kind of social contact with one another and all, I think that is something which is very, first of all, it's very routine. It's none of anyone's concern. And then it's an infringement of, privacy also. So those kind of things have to be respected. Politicians are very thin-skinned. I think they need to be more thick-skinned, because ultimately, see, if there is a book of this, 280 pages, obviously there are 200 pages which actually show, I mean, the House of Scindias from 1731 till date in very good light. But my friends, that's not the case. People don't see it. They just pick on a para or a, sometimes a line, some one episode or something, that they think, no, but ye to wo hai. They're not, they become unhappy.
It's
I'm
not
not
a
about
hagiography.
necessarily
That's
saying the other
correct.
types of any subject that we are not writing. So I think that attitude has to change. When we say that we are becoming a very kind of developed country, or a we have our own civilizational roots, or if we find closer to the Western civilization, look at them, look at the kind of grace they have in accepting such things, and they are very, I would say, candid about a lot of their personal and public things, public affairs, I would say. But here we have a lot of, I would say, hypocrisies there, and paradoxes there. I think time to come, this which we shall overcome.
I'll await your next book on that note. But before I let you go, Rashid, writing about political dynasties, where do you see political dynasties nowadays? We see the Gandhis being challenged within their own Congress, which was never there earlier. It's the age of Modi, where, to be a humble person who's risen from the ranks has more value than a dynast, pedigreed dynast. So where do you see political dynasties in India?
I think, Priya, it's a very complex issue. I mean, people look at it in a very simplistic way. First of all, dynasty, tag goes away the moment somebody gets elected. Like, I mean, this House of Sindhya, so many people have got elected, so people have voted for them. Let us respect that. Of course, at another level, a dynasty always has a advantage over others. But I have a very, I mean, when during the research, I came across very fascinating things. And just let me tell you very quickly. For instance, women participation in politics. Actually, we should be grateful to, dynasty culture. If there are like, 50 women in parliament, so over 20 of them have come from, so to say, those families of politicians or some kind of representing political legacy. Imagine if it was not there, then women representation would have been far less. You look at the number of Muslim women in parliament. See, Priya, you will be astonished. There are over 9,000 MPs so far since independence, since 51 elections. And Muslim women MPs have not been just around 20 to 22, which is far, far less than, what is their population ratio. Okay, assuming that Muslims are 16%, so there will be 8% Muslim women. 8% Muslim women, but in parliament they are 0.02%, something like that. So I am saying that when we go on, criticizing dynasty, we also need to see that it's actually helping in empowering women. A controversial remark, but
yes, controversial remark, but then I think it's a thought-provoking remark, which is what we need. You can't just read out from a script, but it makes you think and makes you wonder that our dynasty is all that bad as they are made out to be. Because at the end of the day, in fact, what Omar Abdullah also said to me once, he says, we may be appointed or nominated by our, fathers or forefathers, but at the end of the day, when we go to vote, it's a democratic vote. You're fighting an election just like anybody else. So if they are chosen, they're chosen on the ground for what they've done or not done. At the end of the day.
Priya, see, the politicians are very clever. See, I have done a study that about 1/3, or let's say 30% of elected representatives, in all political parties, are second generation, third generation, some kind of dynasty link is there. Okay. But they say, no. This in case of Rahul Gandhi, he's a influencer from the top. So it doesn't matter if you have municipal councillors or MLAs or Zilla Panchayat Adhyaksh, etc. That's fine. But when it comes to leading the party, I think these are the rules or norms we are setting for ourselves. It's a convenient tool to belittle other. It is away from it's a clear departure from truth and honesty.
They have elections even within the party. Are we to choose? They don't have a nominated party chief. The way they have to fight an election to get into parliament, let them have a election inside the system also.
Precisely, Priya. I'm sorry, we are just extending time, but since it's very tempting, you are giving a lot of thought-provoking questions. I want to ask a very serious thing. See, there are political parties in India which do not even have a party constitution. Most regional parties you look around are all dynasty-based parties, 1% parties. Have you ever heard of any kind of elections taking place in BSP or YSR Congress or even in Aam Aadmi Party? We just get, so I'm just saying, but I mean, I'm not saying this is a kind of excuse for Rahul Gandhi's diffident attitude or leadership failure and etc. But that's what I'm saying, it is fashionable to target Rahul Gandhi or Omar Abdullah.
That's true. And they have, in fact, been in the public eye of a lot of criticism, because at the end of the day, it's the one who wins election that gets away with it. One can blame Mamta also for promoting her nephew, but she's winning an election. So right now, Mamta is okay, but Rahul Gandhi is not. So bottom line is the winnability, really. But I would like to thank you, Rashid, for a fascinating book, and wish you all the best with it, and all the best with this festival. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. And once again, I'm grateful to PVLF for giving us a chance to discuss. And I must say, your questions were very searching. I don't know how I've been able to negotiate them, but then full compliments to you as a kind of anchor and the interviewer.
Thank you, Rashid. You're being modest. I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.